Good morning. So today we're doing an almost live. I've been up a few hours this morning. Did a little bit of fishing. Ran my son into work. And where's my glasses? Oh, there we go. And I'm just at the bench, still tying. These are kind of a custom order, though it's going to be a regular pattern that I'm going to keep in the line. I was only going to have 6 different of the airhead pattern style jigs this year, and if they did well, maybe next year add 1 or 2 more, something creative, interesting patterns. And I've done a couple this year. One I'm not going to do, I don't think, unless, if there was a huge call for it. There are a couple dozen out there right now. This color, I'm not a football fan. I don't really care about the American Football League or whatever. But there's this jig. It's a pearl head. I was painting some pearl heads for a customer, and just did a couple dozen extra and did this pattern. To me it looks like Dallas Cowboy colors. If there's some Dallas fans out there, I'll send you some if you want. Just go to the website, see if we got any for sale, or message me, and we'll figure it out. But I don't think that pattern's going to, I'm not going to redo those unless I'm asked for it. That's not going to go in the inventory. But this is a color that I painted up. Specifically, there were 2 bait shops that were asking for this color specifically. What this is a Chartreuse head. Actually, let me get my... We have a Chartreuse head. They wanted just the basic Chartreuse. I'm jazzed it up just a little bit. So we have that fluorescent Chartreuse. The first couple samples that I did also had the fluorescent yellow belly. This is just a straight Chartreuse with some layering on the top for a little bit darker fluorescent color, and then the plain white eyes. The pattern that I liked, though is not the pattern that we ended up going with, is a light Chartreuse thread with matching crystal flash. So this is the crystal flash Peacock. It's the KF17 on this one. I kind of like the more subtle, have it all basically one tone, so to speak. But this is what the both bait shops wanted to go with. The red collar with the red crystal flash. And the number on that is... I don't have my bag handy. Crystal Flash number 3. It's an older pack, so it just has 3 on it. I'll double check. I'll double check, and if I find a more modern, more recent purchase of the Crystal Flash, I will put those, the product number, I'll put that in the information down below. But today we're doing another almost live. Just thought I would turn on the cameras. It's about 20 after 9 right now in the morning. Like I said, I've been up a little bit. today. But right now I have 6 more dozen, 3 each of the 1/2 and 5/8 to finish up of these. As normal, I use my size A rod wrapping thread. So I do have some video footage, though I'm not going to be putting the video up. Just making sure that I'm in focus. Everything good. Did have some time this morning. I got out. I had a couple hours if I went out early. We didn't get the rain yesterday like the forecast was calling for. So the river actually is in really good shape. And I was able to take the tandem rigs out this morning. That Wolf River rig could be called. But basically the walleye streamer rig. And I took it to a fairly new section, new to me section of the river. I have known about this section for quite some time, and that it's a good spot for both pike and walleye. My son-in-law around New Year's, my daughter and him came to visit around New Year's, and we did have ice, but we didn't have a lot of snow. We didn't have safe ice yet. Had a terrible winter this year, and so he went out, was fishing from shore, came back with a couple giant walleye, like impressive. And we had gone there a couple more times. We actually checked it out earlier this month when we were doing a little bit of bass fishing, and the river was real high at that point. It had rained for a week, a good week at least. And we were hitting the tributaries, so we came all the way back up from Appalachian, all the way back up to Vestal Endicott area, and that section of the river that I was at this morning was running pretty good. So I really, that's what I was expecting this morning. I was expecting a little bit more current. What I didn't realize is that side of the river, there's an island right there, and that side of the river was a little bit more slack. You know, I could see across the river, and I could see perfectly like the difference in the current, and so I struggled with that walleye fly rig. I actually lost 2 complete rigs, so 4 flies total. Lost a weight. Wasn't as hard to cast as I was anticipating. I was just careful. Did have one mishap. I went to cast, and the one of the flies hooked my second rod that was just laying on the ground, and that would have been a disaster if the second rod went flying, right? But I learned a little bit, I guess, in what I would want to be looking for, I think, in terms of the type of water I'm fishing in terms of current. So there is another river locally. I just didn't have time to get to it today. Maybe later this afternoon, if I get a little busy, you know, it'll have to wait maybe till next weekend. But I still have high hopes with this walleye fly rig, especially in a couple sections of the river where we lose a lot of jigs. It's just a lot of rocks. If I'm fishing the Susquehanna, there's a lot of trees. So it's just going to be one of those things. I will bring the camera along each time. Eventually we'll get some fish on video. I'm not expecting the learning curve to be that big of a deal. I have fish streamers mostly as a teen in the river, where we just added split shot to the line and just pulled the bucktail teaser, because it really wasn't really a pattern to speak of, and kind of jigged it sideways. I've caught fish that way, no problem. But it's, you know, like I said, since I was a teen. So we are live. You might hear some noise. We do have a house full of people today. Here's that jig. Real pretty jig. Super bright. Lots of UV. Did play with possibly adding different color bucktail. Adding the crystal flash down the belly. The back part of the jig as we're tying it, but that's the belly as we fish it, instead of along the lateral lines. Did have a couple. I don't think I have them on my table. I don't have them on my rack right now, but I did do a couple with this section of a green tail. So it was a, you know, this has that, you know, you can still see the brown through it because it's the chartreuse tail. But the back of the green tail, the same part that we use on the perch jig. So as you can see, even though this is from the brown section of the green tail, it still has a lot of green in it. Adding this to that jig, but adding this green top wing that's on the perch pattern to this chartreuse looked pretty sharp. I did up a couple of those. Those went into my box, so if I remember, I'll dig them out. Maybe get a good photo at least. Do have a couple new ideas coming out that we'll be working on shortly. And depending on, over on my other bench, I have 4 bobbins that I bought. I was upgrading the large bobbin that I use. Not upgrading, that's the wrong term. I was just buying a few new ones. These bobbins that I've had on my desk, easily over 10 years old, not even, maybe even longer, to be honest. I've had many of these bobbins since I started tying. I have, I don't know, 7 or 8 that have spools of thread on them that are always ready to go, so I'm not constantly having to reload a bobbin. These are perfect, and they're inexpensive. Just ordered 4. Just going to add a couple to the website because we have sold a few. And treat myself and just get a couple brand new ones. What I found with the new ones, luckily I didn't open the pack yet, they changed the arms. So it's a different type of metal, a little bit thicker, no flex to it. and two, the length of the new bobbin is about half an inch, between a quarter and a half an inch shorter. So completely different. The description says it holds the 1 ounce spool. The 1 ounce spool is the what I call a 950 yard spool. On the pack bay, it'll say 950 yards on it. On the Fuji, does it say? Do they give it? They call it 800 meters on the Fuji spools, though, you know, it's the same size spool, same width. On Goodrod, I believe they always printed 950 yards. So the bobbins that I got they're not usable. They're terrible. Now that could be simply because they changed, you know, got a different machine shop making them, or different, you know, however they get them done. I'm assuming it's some local machine shop that built those. They're nothing fancy. It's not like a typical bobbin, but it's been the same. It's been the same build, the same material, the same product for as long as I can remember. Probably long before I was born. You know, the design never changed. Whatever changes they made, it's not usable. I did find a different bobbin, and it's very similar to, do I have one handy? It's very similar to this style with this shape. I don't know what you would call this part. Whatever the barrel is here on the front. Though the arms are a little bit longer than this, and instead of the little pyramid feet on it, it has two brass balls. And the description for that was specifically for the 950 yard spools. So I did order one, and we'll see how good it is, and I'll do a video on that. But I'm also waiting to see how the company that I ordered the bobbin from. And if you've watched the videos, you probably know the company that I got it from, but I'm waiting to see how they respond before I say anything, you know, bad about it. You know, if they just refund the purchase and I send it back to them, I guess that's fine. But and we'll just talk about, you know, how it's changed, and I'll at least have one alternative, hopefully. I buy the larger spools of thread just because it saves a little bit of money. It definitely saves time because I am not spending time respooling thread. No, it's not much of a big deal. But if I sat here all day long, and I was using spools this size, I'd go through 3 or 4 of those in a day. And I haven't counted, but I seem to my best guess, and I'm not that I've counted, but I'm pretty sure I get about 10 dozen out of a 950 yard spool. Now, give or take, of course, but I think that's pretty standard for these larger spools. Had to add a little bit more wraps to this. There were some tips poking out. Just wanted to make sure they were covered on that side. But we'll see. So, have had requests for a few more crappie jigs. I'm trying to find a couple patterns that might be a little bit different. Materials that might be a little bit different, but not. I'm not just going to go into a fly shop and just say, "Oh, this is a neat material," and try to make it look like, or just use it just because we found something that looks kind of neat on the shelf. I think tires should do that. You know, be creative. If you see something that's inspiring, if you see somebody tie something and you get inspired by that material, sure, by all means, you know, try it out. If you're shopping at a mostly fly shop and you're buying your materials from a fly shop and you just see materials and you buy it just because you think it's neat and you want to play with it, I think tires should do that. I do shy away from just using material without having the reasons why. And these almost lives, let me preface this, I guess. Doing the almost live video, none of this is scripted. I'm just kind of babbling. So my rant and opinion on tires, just buying fly material and just lashing it onto a hook just because, it's just off the cuff. It's just off the top of my head. So I'm not trying to create an argument or offend anybody, but I don't see the value or I don't take tires quite as serious if they're just finding materials on the wall and they keep just lashing it to a hook and with the hopes of eventually, you know, they finally tie something that, oh, that's cool, or oh, it caught a fish. I think the choice of materials is important, and there should always be a why. You should be able to answer questions of how and why you chose something. And if it's just because you thought the material looked cool, I don't necessarily think that's a good enough reason. Now, if you thought it looked cool and you put it on a jig and you fished it and you caught a bunch of fish, if you were fishing in an environment that was super rough on the materials that were on your jig, so you chose a material that was, let's say, for saltwater, so a little bit more durable, or a little bit bigger in scale, and you put that on a jig and you fish it and it works, well, your reasoning, you know, as long as there's reasons why you do that, to me, that's the value in the things that I admire in other tires. So where am I going with this rant? Not exactly sure. And some of it has to do with when I'm thinking about designing a jig. The, you know, just using what I'm tying right now as an example, the two bait shops just happened to talk to me about this exact same color on the exact same day. I suspect there probably was a customer that might have shopped at each place, and that was probably their comment to them. Oh, I want a chartreuse head with a chartreuse tail. You know, your flow yellows are really nice, and your purple and chartreuse is really nice, but it has a black head. I want a chartreuse head, chartreuse tail. I'm guessing, I would bet, that probably happened. And why two bait shops on the same weekend, and they're not that close together, they're 15 miles apart. But probably why they were asking for the same color, or telling me, you know, oh, if you were doing anything new, this is what we're looking for. This would be great. I've been around long enough where I've seen colors come and go. I've seen fads come and go. I've seen, and I'm talking just a design. You know, there's always certain hot colors. But there's the basics, using a basic jig, basic hook, basic head, basic color, and they work. And then there's the times where people read it in a magazine, see it on YouTube, they try it once, so now they want crystal flash and 3 colors hair and and two-tone paint jobs. But you can only what ends up happening is it doesn't survive the test of time, I guess. And like I said, this is all just off the top of my head. It's unscripted. Trying to be a little bit careful with my words. I don't want to just say, you know, I don't want to be mean. I want to be able to at least explain the reasoning behind the opinion, I guess. But you'll have all those fancy things, and it doesn't stand the test of time. You know, in a couple years, there's a new fad. In a couple of years, there's the next new material to use. So I think as tires, people should be able to be able to give reasons why, have some thought behind it. That's what I am encouraged by. That's what I respect, for lack of a better word, from other tires. So, you know, talking about just taking material off the wall that you think looks cool and just using it just because, and you don't know how and why it's being used. You know, I think about, how's this look? I think about guys using really expensive fly tying hackle. You know, fly tying materials, you know, the dry fly hackle, and they're taking full strands and just letting them be tails on a basic bucktail jig. You know, that's expensive. That's, you know, I don't know, I cringe when I see guys taking feathers off a, you know, $100 cape so they can use 3 or 4 full feathers as tails on a jig. When I'm in my mind, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, that's about 20 dry flies that you just use materials that I could use for about 20 dry flies. So I guess maybe not the best examples for that rant, but I think as tires, you need to know how and why you're doing something, I guess is what I'm getting at. So doing this head, you know, it was a color that I considered when I was trying to pick patterns for the airheads. I only wanted to do 6 and stick with that and see if all 6 sold. I'm waiting until the fall. The glow, the one with the fluorescent yellow and the orange nose and the glow Flashaboo. I have sold them, but they're not as, guys don't pick them up and go ooh when they're flipping through the boxes at the stores. I have sold a few cards, but not as many as the perch, walleye, shad pattern. Those have all done well. And that purple huckleberry, I've sold the most of. Surprise! I thought the walleye was going to be the most favorite, and guys do like that walleye head, but the huckleberry, I've actually had to paint more of those than anything else to restock. So for the season, I just wanted to stick with those and not do anything else new. I like to take a year at least, kind of think over the pattern, think it over in my head, consider, you know, I flip through the Cabela's catalog, you know, I go on the Bass Pro website, I look at other manufacturers and see what they're doing. Not necessarily to steal a pattern, but as an example, talking about this pattern here, I did paint up a few heads. Do I even have one here? I don't think I do. Here's an example. This is just, oh, that's a, is that? That still has 2. Where are they? So here's one. So this is just straight, just a plain color. No two-tone, just straight color. Totally fine. This jig probably would have been just fine. This one, here we go. This one had a base of fluorescent yellow, though it has the darker green, darker fluorescent layered on the top with the standard color. I don't have too many on the rack here because a lot of times if it's a head that I painted and decide against it, I'll just tie them up and throw them in my box. Here's another one with the, does have a yellow belly, and then the chartreuse, and then instead of the dark green, this just has, goodness gracious, instead of the dark green, this just has extra layers of the chartreuse on the top, which does give it a darker shade, but that has the yellow, fluorescent yellow belly. It looked good, but I didn't see the benefit in it, adding the fluorescent yellow. It just was too close, and it kind of fools your eyes. There's some of these it looks like the eyes are yellow, and I painted them all the same way, but I think what it is the chartreuse showing through the white, giving the illusion of yellow. Also, it depends what light I'm looking at things under. Oh my goodness. Forgetting to turn on lights here. Nobody told me that I'm sitting in the dark. Almost live, guys. Everything. We're going to keep everything in. All the warts, mistakes, everything. But, so, for the stores, I only gave this a few weeks thought for this jig. That's why I'm still a little, not sure. And like I showed you to start with, I kind of favor the one with the chartreuse thread and the peacock crystal flash, which kind of is a chartreusey yellow-ish, greenish crystal flash. This one here looks green in the pack with it all together, but when you pull, 3 or 4 of those fibers by themselves with the chartreuse background, it's very yellow, very, very yellow, or greenish, yellowish, greenish. Can we see that? So I would much prefer to be able to mull this over, think about things for, a good year, look at examples, notice things that catch my eye in the store, in the fishing catalogs, maybe find a different brand of paint that maybe has a different tone or a shade of a chartreuse. Either finding something completely different to use, or finding something that, when combined with what I was originally thinking, maybe makes it better. But this isn't this. I'm sure this pattern will do very well. It's not a color that is that common. I have seen jigs with chartreuse head. I've seen jigs with fluorescent yellow and chartreuse. I will be tying up a few extras of these and putting them on the website. So be sure to check out the website, jworthhandtied.com. Did have a bunch of orders that took a lot of the fire tiger that I had listed, as well as the perch and sandpike. Those are all popular colors, though the sandpike is more of a, I like using it later in the year, but regardless, did have a couple orders come through, which is good to know that those, kind of, I'm starting to pay attention to see what people are really keying in on. I'll try to make sure to have more of those in the website inventory, have them available. The nice thing about the website is I don't have to have a full dozen tied. If I quickly just do up a half dozen jigs, I can list that on the website, as opposed to, you know, when I'm tying like now for my inventory to take to the stores, I do those in complete dozens because we sell and display those as complete dozens. So these chartreuse tails aren't too bad. The hair is actually pretty long, though it does taper a little bit. The tips are much thinner than the body, the butt ends. But I'm just taking 4 strands of the red crystal flash, tying them in right down the lateral line. A few wraps towards the bend of the hook, a few wraps crisscrossing over to lock them on. Did paint up a bunch of these heads also with purple, brown, and red, three separate jigs, but instead of that darker fluorescent green tone for the top, I actually had those other colors thinking that I would use colored crystal flash that would match either the brown, so I would use a root beer type crystal flash. I think root beer was one of the, or at least the New Age crystal flash had a root beer. It was brown and coppery color. Is a nice, nice tone. The red, I actually thought about using the red New Age crinkle flash and the let's see, the purple, of course, that Winter Run Blue New Age crinkle flash is just a color that I really, really like. These are nice. This is a nice pattern. Like I said, I did put a bunch in my box. I'm going to try these out myself. I think the next time, as long as the weather cooperates, next time I'm up making my circuit, delivering jigs, I'm going to bring the kayak along, and I usually hit all the stores I want to. I'm usually done by about 2 in the afternoon. And then it's a 2-hour drive back. But as long as the weather's good, I think I will take the kayak. Last time I did that, we had the video where it was too windy to fish. I had guys warning me. They were coming in early with their boats and telling me that they were getting beat up on the lake. And my audio, didn't even have audio for that video just because it was impossible. And did try to fish, but it was brutal. So we're about a week after Mother's Day. Waited until Mother's Day to do anything with the plants outside. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we actually had a couple nights of frost this week. But I think majority of plants are still doing okay. We were careful and covered those. I did notice mayflies. We do. I think there's a blue wing olive. Not exactly sure the name of the mayfly, but they look like a blue wing olive that we have hatching in the creek each year behind the house, and it's quite far. It's the length of a football field away at least, but down the back, out the backyard, out the back door. But we had mayflies on the back door the last couple nights. And usually when the mayflies start hatching, the walleye fishing picks up. Is that a thing? I don't know. I'm sure it has something to do with water temp. Why it would be related, I'm not 100% sure. Just one of those old fisherman tales, I guess. But another reason why I'm disappointed I didn't catch anything this morning. And I lost four flies and at least one weight. One complete rig. Which was disappointing. I just finished up a dozen, even though I've only tied a few while we were sitting here, but I will put some head cement on these. Other ideas of videos that will be coming up. Next really, nice warm weekend, I will get the tails out of the garage that have been salted since December. I got a couple trays and I didn't label them. I probably should have. I kind of did it for my own test. Now borax works just fine. There's guys that swear by it. I've never used borax. In all my years, we always just used regular table salt for salting our deer tails. Borax is a salt. You dig it out of the ground as is, right? But it is a type of salt. So I got 3 different boxes out in the garage. I have 8 trays, but there's 3 that I know for sure. One is plain salt, table salt, just like I do every year. One is plain borax. And then one is a mix of both, because I knew that after this year they're going to be mixed together anyways. Each year, if the salt is really dirty, I'll take out the big hard pieces that are just saturated with fat and oils, or if they're dirty for some reason, I'll throw those chunks of salt away. But for the most part, the salt is reusable. So I just put it through a colander or a screen, just to help remove, some of the hair that comes off the tails during the salting. And I just put it back in a jar. I have mason jars that are marked, salt for deer tails specifically. We don't want to eat this salt, but you know, I have salt out in the garage that's years old. But when I take the trays and clean the tails and put the salt into the jars again, I'm just going to mix it, the borax and the salt. I don't see any harm in that, and it might be a good thing. The borax does seem to take the moisture out in a little bit different way than the salt does. It's the same but different, I guess, if I could describe it. Table salt seems to, at least from what I've observed so far, just going in and checking on the trays, the table salt seems to absorb the moisture from the tail, and it absorbs it into the salt, it seems like to me. It probably isn't actually going into the salt granules themselves. It's probably on the outside of each grain of salt. But it seems like the salt soaks up the stuff and ends up drying in clumps. So you could take out a big piece of salt that is obviously, you know, saturated with the oil and the grease and fat, what have you, from the deer tail. The borax, on the other hand, seems to dry the tails, but evaporate whatever it's soaking up. It seems to evaporate, and doesn't really affect the borax as much. The borax still seems powdery. It doesn't clump up like salt does. And those are just observations. You know, like I said, borax is a salt, so it should basically be the same. I'm not going about this in a scientific way, trying to really figure out the hows and whys. But for me, I'm just trying to see, you know, which one works better. If they both work the same, there's no reason to switch over to one versus the other. Borax is a heck of a lot more expensive than table salt. I like to get the no-name table salt when it's, you know, every once in a while you'll see it on sale, or you get it at the dollar store, you know, 2 for $1, or you see it for 50 cents a can. At the grocery store, you know, I just pick up a whole bunch. Borax, on the other hand, I think the last time I bought it was $12 a box, which is kind of expensive. But if I'm throwing away more salt at the end of the, you know, every fall, because I'm taking out the big clumps and just tossing them, maybe it does work out if the borax always stays powdery and you just put it back in a jar and reuse it. So, but I'll turn the video camera on when I'm doing that. We'll show the washing and just laying them out in the sun and washing them, you know, the steps I go through, washing them and combing them and all that boring stuff. I'll probably do a separate video on dyeing. I will need some more purple tails. I bought a whole bunch recently that came, and half were good and half were blue violet, which rubs my ass. But I will use the blue violet up. I just didn't need them. But I will use it up, so it'll go in the pile. It'll go in a bag, go in storage. I'll get to it when I get to it. But I will bring the camera out. We'll do some videos on dyeing. We'll do some videos on how I do the furs next fall. We'll do some videos on how I split the tails. I don't do anything special. I've met guys, I've seen guys, watch guys do it, where they could take the tail and they just do something like this and boom, and they pull the bone right out without ripping the tail. Then they can just take their knife and zip it open nice and straight. I can't do that. When I try to do it that way, I have, you know, you pull the tail off. Oh my God, has this been off the whole time? He asked in disgust. My face has been off the whole time. This is live, guys. So you get a tail like this, and what happens when I try to take the bone and give it a tug, I usually, this section of the tail usually gets ripped off. So the tail is still usable, but it's not a nice pretty filleted bucktail. So I do it the old-fashioned way, or the slow and the way I know that it'll come out okay. But I just take my scalpel and go right down the center of the tail and just very slowly, spread the tail apart and just slowly just cut around the bone. But I'll show it. My way's slower than most, but I'm not doing it for. I'm not processing tails by the thousands, where time is money, right? But I think that's going to do it for the video today. I appreciate people that want to come and listen to my babbling. Like I said, it's unscripted, and I don't know how interesting today was. I did kind of go off on a weird rant. I apologize. Let me do this dozen here, then I'll start on the rest. Let me know what you think about this pattern. If you've made it this far in the video, put some comments down below. Let me know what you think about the color combination. If you like that other one that I showed you with the chartreuse thread and the peacock crystal flash. But I think that'll do it for us today. As always, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any new content. Feel free to share the videos. And we talked recently, one of the recent videos that I just finished, about there's a couple groups that actually use the videos for instruction. I think that's fantastic. I have no problem with people using the videos for that type of thing, and I think that's great. I'll keep doing some more of these formats, at least right now with the schedule and how busy I am. I haven't really planned out any times to sit down and really make videos. So just throwing the video, just putting the cameras on and doing these almost live things helps me get some content out, and I think people enjoy it. So we're going to keep doing it until I hear otherwise, and try to squeeze in some of those other planned, scripted and rehearsed type videos. I definitely will let you know what happens with these bobbins, and do a little bit of show and tell when I get that new one to see how it actually works on these large spools. And I didn't touch on it, but when I've been researching bobbins, something that I haven't had to do, because if I find something that I like and works, I don't change it. But if you read descriptions of bobbins now, I think the thought behind the engineering of a bobbin is they want it to hold the spool tightly, and usually has some way to adjust it to make it tight, like a drag. And I think manufacturers are making a mistake by leaning just in that direction. And I'll explain this when I do the bobbin video, but I've talked about this in other videos. The bobbin, you want some tension on, of course. You want it to have a little bit of drag, but the majority of drag, for lack of a better term, comes from your hand. Okay, so when I'm wrapping, I hold the bobbin tight. If I want to lighten up the tension on the thread, well, I just open my hand a little bit, like, and it's something that I don't think people are able to even see as I'm tying, and it's probably something that I should talk about again. I'm not even exactly sure what video. There was a video maybe a year or two ago, excuse me, where I kind of went off on a tangent as I was tying, just talking about thread control and how I palm the bobbin to create more or less drag as I'm tying. We'll have to definitely delve into that a little bit more in a future video. I'm just going on weird rants. I got to get some breakfast maybe this morning. All I've had was coffee. So, like, comment, and subscribe. Like, comment, and subscribe. Keep tying. Until next time, guys. Tie lines. Oh my goodness.